What does it look like? It looks like an iguana's tooth, little reptile, a lizard, iguana tooth. Except problem is it's 20 times too big. Well, they continued to find more bones of that animal, and they eventually named it an iguanodon, an iguana tooth dinosaur. And that is the first rendering, artist rendering of a dinosaur. I just think it's kind of cool, old looking. Eventually they found more bones, and now they think it's more like that. But anyway, an iguanodon among the first found. And they also found this in England, a jaw with an interesting tooth. They named an animal called a megalosaurus from it, a megalosaurus, giant lizard. Saurus always means lizard, right? So in the name of anything. So, but I like to point out, especially to secular groups, that there was a creationist, a person who believed in God, that actually came up with the term that we all know and love called dinosaur, dinosauria. That was Richard Owen, who was an anatomist. And he came up with the term. And if it wasn't for Charles Darwin, this would have been the most famous British scientist of the 1800s. He set up the British Museum and stuff. Anyway, so what does it mean? It means awesome lizard. So that's what they are, right? And, you know, those other two dinosaurs that they found bits and pieces of, they actually put on display, so to speak, at a, kind of like a World Expo in London, and had these statues. It's the first time that publicly they were shown representations of something that eventually would become dinosaurs. But I think probably the most famous thing is over here in the U.S. And this guy, you know, Joseph Leidy, he had a museum in Philadelphia. And in Philadelphia, well, just outside Philadelphia and over in the New Jersey side, there was a woman who owned a property that they were finding big bones in the marl, the kind of the soft clay. So he asked her for permission and got it to take the bones out and assemble them in his museum. And he put them on display. He did not have a skull, so he made one out of paper mache, put it on top, put it on display, and called it a hadrosaur. And this, in 1868, was the world's first dinosaur skeleton put on public display. And every museum worth their salt today has got some of these. But back then, it was brand new. And if you can imagine, it was astounding. It really shook the world up. They had never seen anything like this. Now, for us creationists, we got hit with questions like, all right, you Bible believers, where are dinosaurs in the Bible? Right? So we didn't have great answers. Sometimes we just go, I don't know. Or I think the devil made those bones and put them in the ground to fool us, something like that. We didn't have good answers. We got much better now. But at first, it was a surprise to all of us. Now, as and this was the first dinosaur in terms of what it might have looked like. We don't know anything about coloring of dinosaurs. There's only been one that I know of that I think they found the kind of material on the body that shows it would have had pigment, but they didn't even know what the color was. So anyway, reptiles are generally pretty interestingly colored, so they're assuming some of them had some. Now, the thing that was interesting about, let me back up for just a second. The thing that was interesting about this display was that Philadelphia is in the United States. They sold tickets. They made money. That's what we do. So they sold tickets. The line went down the street and around the corner. And other museums said, hey, Philadelphia's doing pretty good. We need to get some of these bones too and put them in our museum. And I'm not saying that everybody's always motivated by money, but there's a lot of that out there. So anyway, fossil hunting teams went out and were hired by these big Eastern museums to find bones and bring them back. And so they did every possible thing. There's actually if you like stories with a little bit of edge and a little bit of interest, historically, there were two groups that went out. They were always competing, and they did just about everything illegal they could to find these bones. and sell them to these museums. But anyway, so they started to gather. Look at that big bone there. That's a pretty good-sized leg bone. Actually, you know, at our museum in Ridgefield, at the Union office, we've got a bone like this, an original Camarasaurus thigh bone, and acquired in the period that we were setting up the museum. We had gotten a grant to get some nice items for the museum. I remember praying very specifically to the Lord this prayer. Lord, among the things we're getting for the museum, can you help us get one thing that's a real wow thing that people say, hey, have you gone on over to the museum and seen the whatever? And shortly after, the Lord just steered us to getting a bone like that, and they're not that easy to find. Anyway, so we've got a bone like that you can see in our museum. Very cool. 700 pounds. So, yeah. Anyway, okay, keep going. So here we go. So meanwhile, back in Europe, about the turn of the century, they were finding more bones, like more iguanodons. In Belgium, they were finding them. American dinosaurs were making tours through the major museums. This is the Louvre in Paris, and one of the American dinosaurs being on display there. So the world was getting very acquainted with dinosaurs, mostly the big ones. Mostly the big ones. They were the sensational ones. Now, the American Museum of Natural History, which is New York's big museum, they said, we got to get something too and kind of keep up with the Joneses on this. And so they got this big Brontosaurus and put it on display in 1905. Big, beautiful specimen. And they had people coming from all around the world, and they'd take a look at this wonderful specimen. They say, this is an incredible, I mean, look at this. This is a fabulous specimen of the... Are you sure about the head? It turned out they had the wrong head on this dinosaur. A little bit embarrassing. But anyway, they had a head from an apatosaurus. No, a head from a Camarasaurus on the body of an apatosaurus, and they named the whole thing Brontosaurus. They named it. So, thunder lizard. So, to this day, if you really want to get into an energetic discussion with a dinosaur nerd, and trust me, there are a lot of them out there, dinosaur fans. Ask them this question. So you know about the American Museum of Natural History, right? The Brontosaurus. Do you think there is such a thing as a Brontosaurus? He will or she will have an opinion about that. Anyway, kind of interesting. So in the back of that museum where that display was, of that Brontosaurus, they had this painting up. And this painting helped people try to imagine what kind of world are we looking at? What kind of world where these giant creatures live? What would that have been like? And it's a reasonable question. So if you think about it, for probably about the first 50 or 75 years of dinosaur discoveries, really the thing that you found about dinosaurs was they were big, real big. So that made them interesting. Their teeth were vegetarian teeth. So the only thing you had to worry about really was don't get stepped on, kind of like a big elephant or something. That's all the worry was. And so that was the image of dinosaurs up until the early 1900s. And then they found something with teeth, something serious. I've been on this back road in northeastern Wyoming, and a guy was driving me down this gravel road, and he said, Stan, you see the hill ahead? Yeah, that's where he found it. That's where Osborne found the very first Tyrannosaurus rex, and which means king tyrant lizard. Now, if you don't think that didn't change the image of dinosaurs overnight, it really made an impact. Suddenly, it looked like some dinosaurs you didn't want to be stepped on or get munched by. And so that changed everything in a lot of ways. That's the first one on display. And again, it really, really changed the image of dinosaurs. Now, I'm going to talk briefly about T-Rexes because everybody's curious about T-Rex. In fact, dinosaur collectors, they collect a few bones. Everybody wants something of a T-Rex, which drives the price up. Anyway, so one thing we know about what T-Rex ate was Triceratops. Now, why would we know that? Why would we know Triceratops would be on the menu for T-Rex? Teeth marks on bones. Yes, there's teeth marks on bones. Could be just fighting though, right? Come on, take a guess. Why would we know that? What? No, that's a very good question. We're back to poo. This is the poo girl over here. No, sorry, you know your stuff. That's a very good thought. But actually, no, although kind of. They found a T-Rex skeleton that still had some of its stomach, its lunch. And they looked through the lunch, and there were bits and pieces of Triceratops. And they do know bones that well, trust me, they do, to where they immediately recognize them. Now, that doesn't do one thing. That doesn't answer the famous question that's always on the hearts and minds of T-Rex type people, and that is, was that a predator or a scavenger? Because it could have eaten a dead Triceratops. Is it a predator or a scavenger? Now, why would you wonder about it being a predator? But look at him. Does he look like he's a predator? It's all about the jaw, right? But otherwise, does it look like he could chase down something or grab something? Look at those little arms, little tiny arms. And frankly, the body itself doesn't look like it's built for speed. Looks kind of lumbering. So I like to point out that an Edmontosaurus, which lived it was a hadrosaur that lived in the same neighborhood as T-Rexes, could run 25 miles an hour. Oh, how do they know that? Because T-Rex could run 24 miles an hour. Pause while they think about it and realize that's pretty funny. They don't. So you would, trust me, whatever this could run, you would want to be a little bit quicker. Scavenger or no. So anyway, okay, so T-Rex. I like this T-Rex because it smiles. Yeah, was it a predator or scavenger? Incidentally, this is a real interesting fossilized deposit because it's got a T-Rex and a Triceratops in it. And the Triceratops has teeth marks, and the T-Rex has broken rib bones. So what it looks like is these two fought each other. Now, you can only come up with one scenario I can think of that could explain them being fossilized in the same place right here. The water was rising. They got to a place where there was a high point, and there was not a lot of room between the two of them, and they started fighting. And then the water caught them, drowned them, and preserved them in that place. And you tell me of any other explanation that would work. Anyway, so T-Rex now, here's T-Rex footprints. Kind of interesting. They're not very common. 33 inches long, 9 inches deep. Pretty heavy. Now, this T-Rex was the best ever found, and this was lovingly called Stan, this T-Rex. Yes, seriously, that's Stan. The most complete ever, and it's on Hill City, South Dakota. 40% complete, the most complete of any T-Rex found to that date, until they found a dinosaur named Sue. And Sue was found in South Dakota, and she was 90% complete. Whoa! 90% complete. They sold her to the Field Museum in Chicago for $8 million. Should be billion, really, if you think about it, but no, it was million. An absolute steal at $8 million. And I don't know if you know this, but Chicago's in the United States. They sell tickets. And so she is a moneymaker for the Field Museum, but there she is. And a couple things. Number one, is that the real skeleton? No, it's actually rather rare to have a large skeleton on display with the actual bones. It's almost always a cast replica of the real one. Now, places like this can claim otherwise in the sense that they do have all of her upstairs usually. For instance, they have her skull in a case up in the second floor. But usually they don't have the real thing. Incidentally, when you got Sue, and you can make copies of Sue, you can sell those copies for hundreds of thousands of dollars to other museums and make money just on that. Forget tickets. So anyway, Sue is 90+%. Incidentally, we do not know the genders of any dinosaurs. We don't know the genders. Well, how did they get names like Stan and Sue? It's because of the discoverers of those automatically get them named after. If you go to the Museum of the Rockies in Bozeman, Montana, and they got a nice T-Rex there they call Mike. So it's just whoever discovered it, right? But anyway, Sue, a woman named Sue, found Sue in South Dakota. Another thing, whenever you have the skull, you've got money. Because, yeah, if you ever dig up a dinosaur anywhere and you got a little bit of a skeleton, you're doing good. You're going to make something. But if you find a skull, you just paid your college education for your kids. Because skull is where the money is. Why? Because skulls have very thin bones, and they break down easy. They're very rarely preserved. So anyway, just so you know, when you consider doing some digging this summer. So, but T-Rexes, why do we make something of T-Rex besides they're an interesting dinosaur, is guess what? T-Rexes are our friends when it comes to creation. How did that happen? Because a team to move some bones of a T-Rex into the lab and wanted to study the interior of some of the bones. And so when they studied those interior bones, they actually found out that there was some soft tissue inside these bones. They found, for instance, a flexible vessel that still bent. They found what looked like, it had to be, the stains of red blood cells. All of that's organic material. Organic material does not last for 65 million years. Not even close. In fact, it's kind of funny, when the woman who was in charge of this group, a woman scientist, was hammered mercilessly when she came out with this study report. I mean, what kind of scientist are you? How dare you to do something like that? You're a disgrace to the profession. You should be fired from the university you work for. You know, I mean, really nasty stuff. And, you know, behind a lot of it was, and you know what creationists are going to do with this. But anyway, pounded her. No women's supporters popping up all of a sudden. But, you know, there weren't to be found. But anyway, she did listen carefully to some of the critiques by people in her profession. And she thought, you know, there was a couple of things I could have done better. And so she went back, she redid her research, and came up with the same results, with same conclusions, with better methods. And now, reluctantly, the science world will accept that this is soft tissue. They had other ideas what it could have been. So what's very interesting is, and she made a good science statement. She was a Christian, but a theistic evolutionist. But this is what she said. She said, either there are ways of preserving organic material that we have no clue of, no idea of what it could be, or these bones are not as old as we first thought. And that's a decent science statement. Okay, so, of course, we know which one we would go on. So, you know what that has done all of a sudden? You can, if you listen carefully, you can hear bones being cracked all across the country. No, they're looking for organic material in fossils that they didn't think there would be anything left of. No proteins, no anything. So, last time I looked, there was like, that's been a year or two now, 30-something that they had found, where there was still organic material and things purported to be up to hundreds of millions of years old. Now, here's what creationists do with this information. They point out to evolutionists the multiple studies that have been done on how long it takes for organic material to disintegrate, to break down and be gone in fossils. And I forget, you know, it's usually thousands of years. I think the highest anything could still be in something was 1 million years. So really everything goes in thousands of years. That's using their studies. So we just, say, this is what you said. So it can't be 65 million years old, right? Anyway, the point is these things do not last long. Incidentally, the first thing to go is DNA. First thing to go. And there was one fossil they think they found DNA in, which that would be amazing. Okay, so I'm going to go quickly through a couple more of these things. Fossils, footprints. Footprints is fossils. Have you ever heard, come on now, you're Adventists. You've probably heard stories of human footprints next to dinosaur footprints. Have you ever heard of reports about that? Okay, you have. We know that's down near Keene, Texas, down near Southwestern Adventist University, Glen Rose. Yeah, and this has been looked at rather carefully. This is a place where there is a creek where kids can be splashing around in this creek in the water, and there will be dinosaur footprints in the rocks around them. I don't know of any other place like that. It's very unique. But they think there is a place or two where if you expose more of the rock, you can find trails of dinosaur footprints, and they think there's some human footprints as well. This has been looked at incredibly carefully by Loma Linda geoscience people, as well as scads of other creationist organizations. And here's the thing. And the person that promoted this, I want to say back in the 30s or 40s, was an Adventist who promoted this, named Burdick. So he said that there are human footprints next to dinosaurs, and that should settle everything, kind of, for creationists. Okay. Well, I've looked at the footprints. I've looked at a human one, supposedly, and it's in a museum in Montana, Creation Museum. And that one was clearly carved. No offense, clearly carved. No question it was fake. They weren't presenting it as fake, which bothers me a little bit. But I mean, it was perfect. You don't make perfect footprints. Like a sculpture, no wrinkles, no nothing. It just perfect. That one bothered me. But the other ones that they show pictures of will have a couple of footprints that look sort of human. And then you keep going down that trail and you see some that don't look too human on the same track. So I'm personally skeptical. I'm in the skeptical group. I don't have any problems thinking that humans and dinosaurs lived on the planet at the same time. No question. But the ones that are presented as evidence, I haven't seen anything very convincing. Now, here's the thing. Some that were humanish looking were cut to find out if there's compression underneath the sand. In other words, they didn't just carve it from nothing, but carved it, there was, looks like the original impression was made in some soft sand that hardened into rock. But the people locally there will tell you that for years, these footprints have been sold to tourists. And at first they were selling dinosaur footprints, then they started selling human footprints, but they might easily have been carved out of dinosaur footprints. In other words, starting with the dinosaur footprints and shaping it around them more human, and presenting that as something really unique and really valuable and therefore worth more money. The locals think that. And yet there's still believers in this that, I don't know, are born-again faith people. So, yeah. Okay, now watch out about Bigfoot. Because I do this talk in the Northwest. And I had a guy that was as believable and solid and Adventist as you've ever seen talk to me and tried to convince me that he had seen Bigfoot. And talked about all these other witnesses and everything. And I just kind of, I don't know what he saw. He might have seen something. Might have seen college kids in a uniform or an outfit. Or he might have seen the devil doing something. I don't know. But anyway, I have a hard time on Bigfoot. Sorry, I'm just a skeptic, born skeptic from here to there, I guess. Incidentally, I want you to know one thing about when I was hired. Max Torkelson, the president of the North Pacific Union, knew me well because he used to be a member of my church in Spokane, knew my background, and wanted to start a creation ministry out at the union office. And so he invited me, and I accepted. And he was talking to me about this. He'd say, now, Stan, there's a whole lot of sources of creationism out there, a lot of speakers and things. And I want you to stick to stuff that we can prove, not the sensational stuff, not the anecdotal stuff that somebody hears about, but we can't prove it, or, it's still in that shady area. Just stick to the basics. And I said, oh, that's what I do. I mean, I don't need the other stuff. The science just for basic stuff is plenty, I don't need to find the ark to believe the ark existed, things like that. He even said, I want you to make a list of approved speakers and say, oh, I'm not going there. I'm not going to be somebody's censor or anything. People are free to say what they believe and whatever. That's fine. I'm just telling you what I believe and what hired me. So, okay, moving on. Incidentally, I'll take questions at the end. So if you want to hit me with anything. Incidentally, we do have some skin impressions. I got one up here of a dinosaur. Yeah, when the mud covered the dinosaur at the flood, and of course the body over time would deteriorate, just leave bones. Sometimes they found out that if you just are careful and you pop open this rock, it'll show the depression of the shape of the skin. And so as we look at some of those, we find out that they had reptilian skin. Now, I say that because some people aren't so sure they were really reptiles. They were unique, but they did have reptile skin, scales. Oh, and eggs. Now, when I was a kid, I assumed that a dinosaur egg was something about that size. You know what I mean? Had to be. But guess what? This is a dinosaur egg. And this is from China. And all dinosaur eggs are about this size. There's none that are really bigger. A raptor egg is a little narrower and longer, but in terms of volume, about the same. Now, what does that tell us? That tells us that all dinosaurs started off kind of small. Okay? They all started small. Oh, cute like this. Till it became able to look through a 5-story building window and say hello to the person on the computer at the window. Hey, whoa. Anyway, so eggs are small. And incidentally, almost all the nests that we've found appear to have been shells floating into a depression. You understand what that means? That means flood. So that instead of something nice and neatly laid out, like this picture is suggesting. Okay, so I am now going to tell you what some of you are going to be doing this June. You might want to make notes. This is a voluntary dinosaur discovery option. The month of June, 1 day or 30 days, however you can spare, you can go to northeastern Wyoming, and who wouldn't want to do that in the summer, and go to this place, that is a world-class dinosaur bone deposit. It is the Hansen Ranch, owned by a Christian family for 100 years. And this deposit they knew all about, and they wanted creation scientists to study the bones and not evolutionists. Bless their hearts. So I want to say something like 20 or 30 years ago, by an act of God and timing and everything, God sent Art Chadwick from Southwestern Adventist University, head of the science department, to connect with those people and begin a relationship. And now, every summer, for the month of June, they have a dinosaur dig there that anybody can be a part of. And we take the largest group of any group that goes out there from the North Pacific Union Conference. We take school teachers and their students and take them out there and have an experience digging up dinosaur bones. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? Come on, you guys. So that should excite somebody here. Anyway, it's pretty cool. And, pardon me? Well, we take about 30. There's several hundred that work through that site each summer. And what they basically do is they find enough bones to study for 1 year. And then they come back and get a new batch. That's pretty well what they're doing. And this is a picture there. And so these are some of the bones. This is my assistant's little girl, Lila. She's showing what she found. Here I am holding a rib bone of a hadrosaur, and that's a younger one. There's a bigger one back when I had more hair, and I was cleaning it out. You see that little bottle right there? That bottle has got a compound in it, very much like super glue. And you pour it into the bone, and it just goes into the bone, soaks right in, makes it very hard and very movable, you know. But before we actually move them and wrap them up in aluminum and take them away, before they're taken out of the ground, somebody this is Dr. Chadwick here, but somebody will be bringing a GPS ground position locator, put it on the corner of the bone in its place, the different corners on the bone, and record its position to a fraction of an inch. And then later we'll take pictures of that bone and drop it into a program like this. Take a look at that. That basically is showing where the bones were found as though you remove the dirt and just see the way they were located. Isn't that interesting? This is cutting edge technology. This is ahead of the game on this. Archaeologists are looking at this kind of technology right now for digging up pots and things and other places. But take a look. These are all dinosaur bones. And almost all of them are from one kind of dinosaur called an Edmontosaurus, which is a hadrosaur, a duck-billed dinosaur, about 25 feet tall. If it stood up, its head would be about at the top here. Otherwise, I kind of call it like a giraffe-sized dinosaur. But so take a look at these bones and tell me what you see or don't see in that picture. Okay, no heads. Remember what I told you about the skulls? No skulls. What else? It's jumbled. Okay, so we don't have, this is disarticulated bones. There's no knee bone to the hip bone going on here. Nothing is connected. So that tells you a little bit about what may have happened here. Also, pardon me? Something ate it. So maybe these were all, no, I won't say. Anyway, so the point is here, if you look at the study of the corners of some of these bones, look at these big leg bones. This is about 4 feet right here. So when you're looking at 4 or 5 feet, could be 5. When you're looking at the corners of the bones, some of them are rounded, show that they've been rolled. So there's only one thing that explains this, and they've told us that this is less than 0.5% of the total bone field, and that the density of bones is similar to this. So think about this. So this is a huge, you can't hardly put the shovel in the ground without hitting something. That's how cool it is to dig there. And no, you can't keep what you find, sorry. Oh well, people always ask that. You'll probably get some bits and pieces of souvenirs, but anyway. So when I asked Dr. Chadwick, have you done a survey of this area? Yes. Have you found bones density similar to this? Yes. What are we looking at total here? And he says somewhere between 10 and 20,000 hadrosaurs. Now, there's only one explanation as to what could happen to do this bone field like this. Think of this being 0.5%. Think of the size of the bone area that we'd be talking about. Only one thing. So whatever killed these dinosaurs rolled their bodies in water for quite a long distance. So much so, and I hate to get gross here, but the bodies fell apart, the skulls broke, and eventually the bits and pieces all ended up in a basin, a lower area, filled up, actually graded beds. The big bones were at the bottom, smaller kind of work up, and got buried in mudstone there. Now, you tell me what that sounds like. Sounds like one of the actions of the flood, doesn't it? So what else could do this? So this is a major, major part of the ending of dinosaurs. Incidentally, I attended once, now this was not an Advent, it was Answers in Genesis, Creation College, and I went and heard this, and very funny guy talk about bones and dinosaurs. And he said, there's been a lot of theories about what happened to the dinosaurs. Maybe mice ate the eggs, maybe they got some disease or whatever, rattled off a few lists. Then he finally says, you know what, it's kind of funny. And where we find a full skeleton, it kind of looks like they drowned. So, incidentally, they will often have the famous death by water shape, and that is with their head back like that, gasping. So that's a typical thing. That's a whole study. Okay, so yeah, that's some of these guys look like that. Dinosaur to bird evolution, did you know that, and this is one of the things they think there's a slam dunk on. Oh, please don't tell me you don't believe in dinosaurs becoming birds through evolution. Oh, please. We all know that happened. Okay, so anyway, they have two theories. One is that it was large ground bipeds, two-legged dinosaurs, big guys like this. That became a bird. Now, what do you think is the problem with that? I'm waiting for somebody to say that probably the more correct answer is what's right with it. This looks like it'd make a terrible bird. The smallest limbs have to become the largest, and the largest the smallest. We got to lose this big heavy tail. You got to lose a whole lot of weight, and then eventually you want to develop hollow bones and feathers and all that. So there's a lot of problems with that. They kind of realize some of that, so they have a secondary theory. That's their name, not mine. I'm not making it up. Small crocodiles from the trees. So here's the idea. So a crocodile type thing crawled up a tree, saw food out there a little bit, and jumped and got it. Successfully ate and had babies. Okay, moving on. Eventually, some that were used to doing this jumping, one of them somehow or other developed wing flaps right here, like this. So they could go further out. If you go further out, you get more food. And you make babies, and then eventually, one of them had wings with feathers. Any questions? Yes. Does she have a question? How do they grow wings? I don't know, and that's for them to try to tell you what they think happened. But yeah, how do you grow something that you didn't have before? So, and this is where they come up with mutations. Maybe mutations would do it. The problem is every mutation they've ever studied is something is broken. It's a loss of function. A mutation is something that worked before, but now it's not working. So how do you keep that going, and not only for one species, but all the species, over several, maybe 1,000 times in the development of that species? And we haven't seen it happen once in a laboratory. You remember that quote? So, oh boy. Anyway, so large tail skin folds, cold-blooded to warm-blooded. Incidentally, that's another one they can't figure out. Also, even lungs, because a bird, when it's breathing, is basically breathing when it flaps its wing, like that. That is definitely not what a lizard is doing. A lizard is like, you know what I mean. It's just very slow. Okay, so bumpy scales to feathers. Now watch carefully, because I'm going to show you that it's certainly logical, right? So a bump on a scale would eventually develop into a follicle that can grow out from under the skin. See? That to that. Okay? You want me to do it again slower? So you see how logical it is to did you see that?
It's logical. If you forgot that the ostrich has tiny T-Rex little wings when you pluck them. So, I think
Has any of you ever seen any of these? I know that Adventist means we never see movies. Okay. But in case anybody who's heard about a movie, those Jurassic Park movies, boy, is there bad science in that. It's just complete with bad science. They have in the last movie is this giant one with giant feathers, and it's just so humorous. And they're trying to train us into believing evolution is true and birds are just dinosaurs, a little smaller, that's all. Anyway, I don't know. So when you go to Kentucky Fried Chicken, you're getting a bucket of dinosaurs. That's what you're getting. Oh, boy. So dinosaur evolution. Now, when you think about dinosaur, you think, well, now dinosaurs are evolution. That's it. in an animal, that's dinosaur. Yeah, you got to have evolution for that, right? So here are 10 types of dinosaurs. I'll even put birds in there for the fun. And these are the amounts of fossilized evidences they have. These are all very conservative numbers. We only have 6 of these in fossil form, but it's distinct enough to warrant a different type. So here we go. All of these kinds, and going back into time, they came from some kind of Triassic level ancestor. Never found it, but must surely eventually, go back here. Because they're all dinosaurs, they all must have a common ancestor. So we have lots of fossils below these guys, so are any of them being helpful? No, we haven't found any. And again, if you think, I'm kidding, listen to this evolutionary scientist. From my reading of the fossil record of dinosaurs, no direct ancestors have been discovered for any species. All right? Alas, my list of dinosaurian ancestors is an empty one. So they admit it, even dinosaurs. Yeah, okay. Let me give you an example of even stasis. What does the word evolution mean specifically? Evolution. Just the word. What does it mean? It means change. Okay. You know what stasis is? No change. So stasis is no change. In the fossil record, we find stasis, not evolution. Let me give you an example. Let's say that we imagine that T-Rexes lived for, let's say, 8 million years. Let's say from 73 to 65 million years ago. That was the reign of T-Rexes. If we dig one up at the 73 million mark, and we dig one up at the 65 million mark, is there any change within that species? In other words, do we have an old one and then a more modern version a little later? You follow? And we don't. They're the same. There's stasis even within the species, even in the range they think that species lived. You follow? So there's not even evolution within the species, let alone new species evolving toward the future. So when we talk about dinosaurs, we're typically thinking about size. Size. Well, guess what? Dinosaurs, and this is the one thing I'll give the Jurassic Park movie credit on. They will show little bitty dinosaurs because they did exist. They actually were down to the size of chickens. So, so that brings us to the famous question of, well, what's the difference between a dinosaur and a regular reptile? Let's see if anybody here knows. It's a good trivia question. What? No, not age. You always have somebody who's smart and knows the answer and just shows off like that. Good job. That's the correct answer. It's in the hips. Okay, everything's in the hips. With a regular lizard today, whether it's a Komodo dragon or alligator or lizard or whatever, they have legs that go straight out. In other words, they kind of get around like this. Whereas dinosaurs have hips that put the legs straight down and get the body off the ground, whether it's two-legged or four-legged. They get them off the ground. You're correct. Give that guy, a brownie point. So there we go. So good job. All right. So we're going to skip the video, and I'm going to go straight to the Bible about the subject of dinosaurs. Is there any mention of dinosaurs in the Bible? Now, of course, remember the word itself is from the 1800s, so it's not going to be all the way back. But is there anything that sort of sounds like a dinosaur? Let's start off, first of all, with something mentioned in the 5th day of creation. And God created great sea creatures. And the word for creature there is tananim, a Hebrew plural word. And the word tananim, usually, the rest of the Old Testament describes some kind of a reptile. So did God create great sea reptiles? Don't know. I'll leave that to you to decide whether he did or not. But let's go to a couple of things that are in Job. We'll just go to one, because everybody wants to ask about Leviathan. Hold the thought. Let's go to Behemoth. Behemoth in Job 40. Now, I have to tell you this. Read the last few chapters of Job, because they are the longest section in the Bible where God is speaking nonstop. And just right like that, it's worth a read. But what's he doing with Job and his friends? Trying to correct him. Actually, God's speaking because he can't take it anymore. He's listening to Job and his friends trying to figure God out. And eventually he breaks in and he says, who is this darkens counsel without knowledge? Oh, in other words, he's saying, I can't take it listening to you guys anymore. And so he starts talking about, this is why you should trust me because I've got this. I've got nature in hand. Look what I do with nature. And actually, if I can put it in human terms, this may be a stretch, but God's almost bragging about the cool things he's made in nature. Have you seen this? Have you seen this? Seen the stars? You've seen the Pleiades? You know that they are bound together? We know that, incidentally, with bindings binded. How can you bind? How do you guys know how to bind this? Do you know how to do that? He does all this stuff. And you know what also he says? He said, have you noticed ostriches? And you notice that I didn't make them very smart. He says that. They're not very smart birds. They lay their eggs on the ground, don't take care of them. They're not very smart. Now, why would God say that to Job and his friends about not being very smart? Is he saying that I could have made them smarter? Maybe I could have made you guys smarter than what I'm listening to. I don't know. I just wonder. But, okay, he talks about the behemoth. And the word behemoth, behemoth in Hebrew is not a real clear word. It means beast. So it's usually the beast. Okay, so now look now at the behemoth which I made along with you. Sixth day of creation, humans. He eats grass like an ox. Vegan. Okay, good. See now, his strength is in his hips. His power is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. His bones are like beams of bronze. His ribs like bars of iron. So look at a powerful, powerful animal. He is the first of the ways of God. Now that last line there, I really was curious as to what that meant. Did a lot of study as to what researchers and linguists make out of this. And there's a general agreement this is not talking about chronology. This is not talking about the first animal made. This is talking about an animal that was preeminent above all the other animals. It was in first place. It was the top of the pyramid, the alpha of all alphas, an amazing winner of the most amazing animal contest. Okay, now I'm getting all excited about this when I'm looking at this. Have any of you got the kind of Bible that has in little tiny print at the bottom of the page, scholars think the behemoth was what do they say? The most common one is a hippopotamus. Now, I don't know about you, but a hippopotamus doesn't strike me as that most amazing of all animals. Did you notice the part about his tail? All right? It moves his tail like a cedar. Have you seen a hippopotamus tail? A cedar tree is the largest tree in the Middle East. So it would evoke something a little bit bigger than this. And incidentally, second choice, elephant, same thing on the tail. So powerful animal in the middle with a tail, and literally the Hebrew verb there is sways his tail. Sways his tail like a giant cedar tree. What's that talking about? How about, and here is Job and a hippopotamus for scale. Might he be talking about something like this? Now, this would be a legendary animal to Job, but that the ancients knew had existed. Would that be something that fits the bill as the most amazing animal ever? I kind of think it's a better choice than hippopotamus. And I'm going to leave it to you. I'll leave it on that because I know some of you have some questions about Ellen White's things, and we'll get to that. We sure will. Incidentally, do creationists believe that any animals evolved, as in changed? That animal changed, didn't it? For whatever it used to be, God cursed it. Now, another thing here, you're Greeks, and I hope you don't feel bad about that because you're Greeks. You can't help it. You were born Greeks. Me too. So you think Western. For a moment, I'd like you to try to think Hebrew for a minute, and the subject is blessings and cursings. Blessings and cursings. If you bless something, and you're Greek, you bless something, you say, have a great day. That's a blessing. Or if you're cursing somebody, they just cut you off in traffic. In Hebrew thinking, it's a much more significant thing. A blessing would actually leave something tangibly better than what it was. We can think of instances where maybe a woman was childless and was blessed and therefore had the ability to bear children after. Or, I mean, Jesus understood the concept when he sent disciples out to places, enter a home and may your peace rest on that home. If the home proves to be unworthy, you take the blessing back, the peace back. It's clear. So blessings and cursings have a significant impact. When God says that to the serpent, I am going to curse you, you are going to lose all of the abilities you had to attract that woman over to you. You're going to not be beautiful anymore. You're not going to be any of the things that have caused her to find you interesting and draw you over. You are now going to be cursed, but not just you. All cattle are going to be cursed for the effect of sin. All animals now become less than what they used to be. As we know, mankind became less than what we used to be, humankind. So you remember this, we talked about this during the flood, that the animal kingdom was corrupt and had lost their way and become more violent. Now, I want you to take a look at some dinosaurs like this. Ankylosaur. Ankylosaur, for instance, I show this to kids. Kids think they're cool. But the thing is, this looks like a tank on 4 legs. Doesn't it? It's got spikes in its back. It's got a armor-plated head. It's got a club for a tail. This animal looked like it lived in a violent world. Doesn't it? Everybody awake from that great meal? Okay. Doesn't that look like, these animals look like they live in a violent world. This has spikes on a tail it could use as a weapon. This animal ran into things with a bony head. Pachycephalosaurus means bonehead lizard. So these animals look like they did not waddle right out of the Garden of Eden. I want you to remember that in the context of Adventist thinking about some of this. So I'm just going to go quickly through a couple of things here. This is just a fun thing, What happened to the dinosaurs? They were on the wrong boat. This group of animals didn't want them. Okay, but actually, you know what? I didn't talk about this during the flood. I could have. But I rather am a believer of the idea that meteors were involved with the flood. God throwing rocks. And this is a typical judgment tool God uses throughout the Bible to initiate a judgment. And it could have broken the crust of the earth up into pieces, could have pressurized water and other sources of liquid underneath the ground to force them up. Could have knocked the earth on its axis like this, which would now require seasons. You remember at the end of the flood, God says, from now on, we're going to have cold and warm, and it makes it sound like that's the beginning of seasons. You don't get seasons this way. You get seasons this way. So I'm just wondering if maybe some of that happened from the flood. I'm just going to go, there's evidence. Some people think dinosaurs were, yeah. Okay, so let's just get to this. Did dinosaurs get on the ark? Well, here's the thought. We've got dragon stories all around the world. What are dragon stories? Remember what the word dragon means? Big. No, that's awesome. Lizard is dinosaur. Large reptiles, what the word dracon literally meant. And we have dragon stories from all around the world, and those dragons are not house size, they're usually horse size. But why in China? Why in England? And all these stories have these similar features. There's always one. There's never herds or flocks or families. It's like it's always the last one. It's a problem. It's scary. It's annoying. It's a nuisance. It's dangerous. It's whatever. And by the end of the story, it's no longer a problem. Now, why is it that those stories are consistently talking about big lizards? And remember what a lizard typically was to anybody living in any time of history, just an annoying little critter. So when you ask an evolutionist, why do you think there's all these dragon stories? Well, they might say something like, Well, they found these big bones, and they imagined these to be giant dragons. I say, well, how would you get lizards out of that? If you lived in an area where the only dangerous thing was a wolf, let's say, why wouldn't you imagine this to be giant wolves? Why a giant, annoying little critter? So the point is there is this consistent thing. There are no stories of giant wolves or tigers or lions or bears. They're always consistently lizard stories. Now, I think that we as creationists would probably all agree that they are the remains of the days when people and big lizards lived together. Here's the question, though. Was this post-flood or pre-flood? Post-flood or pre-flood? Remember, last one, and then there's no more. I tend to think that they are post-flood. And I actually think that some dinosaurs, yes, some, and give me a little time to develop that, some dinosaurs got on the ark and became the source of these stories. Now, let me show you a couple of other things. We're going to wind up with a couple of very positive things. One of the things that could have showed you in that video on dinosaurs, and I interview a bunch of scientists, creation scientists, about dinosaurs. One of the things I always ask these guys and a woman was, do you think dinosaurs are going to be in heaven? Most of them say yes. A couple say not sure. John Bradshaw lifted to God. He said maybe. But anyway, take a look at this. The wolf and the lion shall feed together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play by the cobra's hole, and the weaned child shall put his head in the viper's den. In other words, and they shall not hurt. In other words, the reptile kingdom will be restored to whatever it was when God had originally created it. So, and without any dangers or worries. So that's kind of interesting. Now, I'm going to put a scary head on this guy, and I'm going to change this word dragon. Remember, dragon means large lizard. I'm going to put a scary head on him and change this to a word that means roughly the same. Awesome lizard, big reptile. So the great dinosaurs was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. Now, Revelation 12 is just in front of Revelation 13. Good for you. And Revelation 13 is just in front of, thank you, Revelation 14. 12, 13, and 14 all are in a bit of a chronological flow. And 12, where he's talked about as being a deceiver. What would he love to deceive the world into thinking? How about that we were not created by God? He is not a source of worship. Don't worship God, the creator, as we see in Revelation 14. Because you are not created in God's image. You're all accidents. You have no future, no hope. Boy, wouldn't he love to train the world into thinking that? Oh, and what image would he like to use to 1,000 words worth of picture? How about a dinosaur? Because when people see dinosaurs, don't they typically say dinosaur? Yeah, dinosaur. Millions of years, not Genesis. Am I right? I think that it's an effective image that the devil uses to deceive the world into not believing we created by God. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of quotations that people always ask me about, not always sure where they're found, but have some ideas. If there was a sin above another which called for the destruction of the race by the flood, it was the base crime of amalgamation of man and beast, which defaced the image of God and caused confusion everywhere. Wow. Let's start with the first part of that. If there was a crime that caused the flood, if it was like the triggering event, well, I say, when I see something like that, I say it's going to be in the Bible. So I go to Genesis 6. Incidentally, what does amalgamation mean? Mixing, combination, mixing. We use the word to describe of alloys, making alloys of metal. So amalgamation. In the 1800s, it was used to mix just about anything. But we use it more modernly as metals. Okay, if there was a crime above any other, so it's going to be in the Bible. I go to Genesis 6, and it says this, and the sons of God looked upon the daughters of men, that they were fair, and that they married whomever they chose. Look at the next verse. God's done with man. I'm giving man 120 years, I'm done. That's it. Okay. So what was the sons of God? Who were the sons of God? Please don't say angels. The line of Seth, right? The believers, the godly line, through Methuselah down to Noah, that godly line. But some of them married out of the faith, married those who were the daughters of men. The line of Cain, the idolaters. Ellen White has a lot to say about that in different places. And she said the effect of that marriage defaced the image of God in mankind. And suddenly God was sorry he had made man. There's nothing of his image left. So that defaced. So that was a triggering event. But what's the amalgamation of beasts? And incidentally, it's not man with beast. The Ellen White estate has said clearly that's not what she was talking about. So beast with beast, which caused confusion everywhere. Now, check this out because she has other things to say about confused species. All right? Okay. So man played around with animals. Every species of animal which God had created were preserved in the ark. How many? Every that God had created. The confused species which God did not create, the result of amalgamation, were destroyed by the flood. Okay. So let's talk a bit about pre-flood man. Smart, right? Bigger brains, all of that. How far were they developed in their knowledge? Who knows, but probably pretty far. If I am a brilliant pre-flood guy, and I'm also sliding into this thinking of evil only continually, leaning toward violence, and I'm looking at the dinosaur species that are around me, am I thinking, I'd like to push the frontiers of science and develop new ways of thinking and seeing about how far we can learn about biology by combining some dinosaurs together, seeing what I make? Would that be the motivation? Or would it be perhaps something like, what kind of pit bulls can I make dinosaurs into? What kind of warrior animals? What kind of combat animals? What kind of hunters? What kind of sport animals in an arena can I breed and make, since I am only thinking about evil continually and violence is my thing? Wouldn't that be the motivation? And what kind of animals would you imagine them to make? How about things that look like they are living in a combat-oriented world, like the ankylosaur? So here's what I think. I think that the confused species that were destroyed in the flood, that man had bred, were bred for the purpose of developing violent animals, for the possible reasons I just said, sport, whatever, warfare, who knows. And those animals were destroyed in the flood, because that's the ones we got the fossils of. Did some that were vegetarian, some that were not violent, some that were just simply amazing animals like behemoth, possibly preserved? Did they make it onto the ark, and did they become the dragon stories that we hear about later? And they're very rarely talking about a violent animal, they're just talking about a scary animal in those stories. There was a class of very large animals which perished at the flood. God knew that the strength of man would decrease, and these mammoth animals, talking about size, could not be controlled by feeble man. So there was a class of very large animals. I'm assuming the four-legged sauropods like these, the big guys, bigger than elephants, because we got elephants on the ark. So it had to be some animals that were bigger than the elephants. That God destroys not because they were amalgamated, are you listening? But because they're too big. Now, prior to the flood, we think the atmosphere was so pro-plant growth that you could practically watch plants grow. God needed great big hedge trimmers. But after the flood, the food would be very scarce, and man would be shrinking. Remember, here we are, shrunk. And so these animals would become too large to us to control, whereas before the flood, we were bigger, and the size proportion would have been a little bit better. So, okay, so I hope I'm answering everything that you're coming up with. And of course, we saw this one here. So I'm going to conclude now with a period of questions and answers. If you want to ask me a question, I'll give you an answer. It'll be worth exactly what you paid for it today.
One of the things I wonder about in regards to the flood is the sea creatures.
Yes.
So as the floods came up, they kind of had room to go wherever they wanted.
First of all, why do we have billions of fish fossils? Here's the thing. Have you ever had a fish for a pet, an aquarium or something? If you have, you know that you got to keep the temperature regulated or you lose the fish. We think that a couple of things very serious were going on in the oceans that would cause many fish to die, and that would be temperature changes, switch, basically from volcanic action. And then secondly, with mud coming down into the water and starting to cover things, the mud would make it difficult for some fish to breathe. So we think those are reasons why. As far as why do we not have megalodons or some of these big ichthyosaurs that we could imagine them swimming out somewhere, we think that probably some of them did survive for a while, but they lost their food sources. So the food that they whatever ate before could have been damaged too much by the flood as well.
I had a professor, and his thinking was, because my question was, why do we never see any young dinosaurs? So his thing was the flood had to come in the spring, thus we have all eggs. Have we actually found, I didn't say it was the greatest theory he has, although it has a paper, but do we have any dinosaurs where we can say, okay, maybe we've made a subspecies that really belongs to maybe
One of those categories is actually T-Rex. There's a junior form of T-Rex, what they call mini T-Rex. I forget what the yeah, a nano. That's what it is, a nano T-Rex. They think there's a such thing as a nano T-Rex, and then others say no, those are just young T-Rexes. So it's full of skepticism, and I don't know. Good guessing, and don't know. Some people say, is it true that some reptiles keep growing and don't stop growing? And that is true, actually. So I'll leave that to you to decide what that means. Yes, you have a question? How did they die in the flood? Well, the flood was very big. Think about the ocean, that big. Anything, if it can't swim that good, it's going to drown in the ocean. So it was really, really big, the water. Good question. I don't know if I completely did. I finish that? Help me. Yeah.
You can't. I mean, you gave me your best thought, which is basically my thought on the subject. So
Well, I'm honored.
It's unanswerable. It's a question for God.
In regards to the time frame that dinosaurs are usually cast into, 65 million, 75 million years.
65.
Has there been any, I wouldn't say major, but any competing evidence to fossils being found
In other layers.
Yeah. Of
Yeah, there are occasionally, out of place bones.
most players would have been dinosaurs that maybe did make it on the ark because if they were adolescent.
We don't have, the only thing that we have that's really clearly post-flood in terms of fossils or animals are not really petrified at all. And that would be like mammoths. We got mammoths, things like that. Remember, the conditions required to petrify something, and that is basically it's got to be the flood. It's got to have lots and lots of sediment, lots of water, lots of pressure, and those things didn't happen that much after the flood. So that's why those animals aren't preserved. Incidentally, speaking of dinosaurs and petrification, they have found in North Alaska, the North Slope area of Alaska, and when I was in Fairbanks doing a talk, I went to the University of Arizona at Fairbanks. Their museum there on campus has bones of dinosaurs, a smaller kind of hadrosaur that actually are not petrified. Now, I want you to think of that. That's very significant, that the bones are like fresh bones. They're not petrified. And they admit that, straight out. It's like, isn't this amazing? These bones aren't petrified. And I want to go, have you read the Bible? Yeah. Anyway, so it's interesting. So there are some anomalies around. But in terms of the location of the bones in the sorting that took place during the flood, even if you find exceptions, you still have to explain why there appears to be some sorting like that. Yes?
Did God make dinosaurs?
I think so. I think God made a basic kind of dinosaur. I think some people did some wrong things with some dinosaurs, but I think that God made them. See, the devil likes to mess up the best things God has made, doesn't he? He likes to mess up marriage. He likes to mess up the Sabbath. And I think he took the most amazing line of animals and messed with them too. That's what the devil does. So, any other questions or thoughts? And understand, you guys in the back, it's dark back there. You're going to have to really reveal yourself. Okay, anyway. Yes, here's one.
Not dinosaurs, but back to talking about the Grand Canyon and the layers and so on. I had heard that they did carbon dating in the Grand Canyon, and that material from the bottom of the Grand Canyon wound up being...
Okay, I know where you're going.
You know where I'm going?
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
And it's not carbon dating. Understand it's radiometric dating, which is not carbon. Carbon dating is a kind of radiometric dating, the dating of rocks. Carbon-14 is only used to get thousands of years from organic material, things that used to be alive. I've got another lecture on that one. And incidentally, if I don't mention to skeptical audiences that we still are working out things on the age of the earth. So that's one of our weak areas too. But when we show them that visible, where there were written witnesses of flows, for instance, in Hawaii, we knew this one happened this year, and yet they date to millions of years. It looks good on paper, but it doesn't always work, the radiometric dating. So radiometric dating has to do with measuring how much decay there is in a rock. It has to be an igneous rock, or in the case of carbon-14, it's going to be organic material like bones. And you're mating, no, I don't want to go into detail. It's interesting to me, but not to you.
The rock in the Grand Canyon can't really...
Okay, let me get back to that. That's a famous illustration that was done some years ago, and they were dating lava flows in the Grand Canyon, now, which is not carbon-14, it's potassium argon. They were dating for millions of years. They dated some rock that was in the fossil record that dated to, I don't remember the exact date, but let's say a billion years. A billion years. And then they went and dated some lava flows underneath that were clearly older and came up with much newer years, much newer dates. And that's an example of how inconsistent, when you actually use them. It looks good on paper. When you use it, it's different. Let me give you one thing that's interesting about at least to me, about the issue of radiometric dating. I went to a creation college where one of the world's experts on aging, creationist, and the subject of rocks decay, works for the Atomic Energy Commission. I mean, he's a top-shelf PhD scientist, creationist. He gave a lecture, and we were there for that. Then after the lecture, he was just kind of out and about waiting for the next one to come. And you know how it is. People gather around the speaker. So I gathered around like with everybody else. And I said, oh, man, I hope I get a shot at a question. Make it a good one. What would it be? So anyway, so I get in there. And finally, I say, so, Professor, do you have a theory about what physically happened on the planet when sin happened? And he brightened up. Why, yes, I do. I thought, oh, good. Whew, a good question. He said, I think something like a shock wave went out across the earth and hit everything. And now understand, this is what he thinks on the subject of radiometric dating. They did a study called the RATE Project by creationist scientists who wanted to look at the rocks and see if they could explain why everybody thinks it's millions of years. When they looked at the rocks, they came up with the following conclusions. Yes, decay has happened. No question, decay has happened. Something happened here. But then they noticed also that there's still a lot of helium in the rocks. Now, helium has been a long issue in the subject of the age of the earth. For years they wondered, why isn't there more helium in the air around us? There should be if the rocks have been aging for billions of years. Should be more product in the air. Where are they? They found out it's still in the rocks. I don't know if you know about helium, but helium is a teeny tiny, itsy bitty little atom, very small. You try to have a balloon with them in it, and if it's rubber, forget it. But even if it's mylar and you've got helium in there, give it enough time, it'll get out. The helium will get out even through the mylar, the high density thing. So helium gets out of stuff. Why is helium still in the rocks? And one of the ways of explaining it would be something like hitting the rocks and causing a lot of decay, causing a total amount of decay that would have normally taken hundreds of millions of years. But the helium is still in the rocks. Now, I don't know how to explain that or any more than that, but that's intriguing to me. I'm going to finish. Can I finish this talk with this topic, which I think is significant in a lot of ways? And that is, what is the wrath of God? What is the wrath of God? Let me start you off with this second question. Did Jesus experience the wrath of God? Yes. He experienced the wrath of God because he didn't want us to experience it. Am I right? Boy, you should be quick, guys. Did Jesus experience the wrath of God in our place as this guilty sinner in our place? Am I right? Okay, let's hear some amens. Amen. Okay, now, if you believe in hell, why isn't Jesus burning in hell right now if he's our substitute? He should be in hell if you believe in hell. Am I right? Or am I losing a logic here? Okay, so, but did he experience the full wrath of God? Yes. And what was the wrath of God? Separation. Separation. God took a step back from Jesus, and Jesus was so connected with the Father that he felt it right away, and it killed him. Father, where did you go? I mean, he's literally asking that. Why did you leave me? He knew why, but when it happened, it was like, we have no idea. We have no idea. This is what we're going to be studying for eternity. We have no idea what Jesus went through. It was off the scale. But he experienced the full, undiluted, 100% wrath of God, and it killed him. Now, what is the wrath of God generally? Did you see in Romans 1, it says the wrath of God is revealed now in the sons of men? In other words, we can see the wrath of God now happening. What is that? Because he lets them go and do whatever they want to do and experience the full results of their choices. That's the wrath of God. The worst thing that God can do to any of us is leave us. And our request is when he leaves. But leave us is the wrath of God. So what happens when Adam and Eve sins and God is forced to respond, if they're in essence asking God to leave, God leaves. And he takes a step back from this world. And what does that do to this planet? It starts to fall apart. Entropy, right? Everything going toward room temperature. Incidentally, aging. Everything going downhill. When God steps and honors Adam and Eve's decision. That's why second coming is so wonderful. Oh my goodness, for Jesus to reconnect. Take a look at Romans 8. Romans 8 says the whole creation is groaning. And they're under the corruption, what is it? The burden of the corruption of a decay in the world. And they're all groaning, longing for the release of it. And it says when the sons of man will be revealed. The sons of God, sons of man, sons, God, us being revealed. What does that mean revealed? When we get fixed, the planet gets fixed. It's kind of like whatever happens to us, the planet goes with it. I don't want to go too mystical with this. I don't want to go too magical. But it's almost like the further mankind, and I'm talking about humankind, societies depart from God, the further God steps back. And we see the results. You can go anywhere with that. Mass killings, you name it, whatever, the raging politics, the world, everything. When God steps back, things go toward chaos. Because if we ask him to leave, he will leave. That's the thing about God and freedom. But anyway, so getting back to the age of rocks, I'm just wondering if that was a force field that just smacked it when God took a step back, I wonder. Wrath of God isn't it? It had to be. It had to be. Yeah. Yes. Yes. It gets dark. God is an organizer. God sustains. Nothing died in the presence of Jesus. There's a power, there's a binding, there's something there I don't understand. We know that we are sustained by God as an active part of God's work in the world. Actively sustains us. So I don't know. Yeah, it's a whole big subject. It's interesting to me. But Jesus is wonderful in taking that on. And he did not want to do it. When he got in the Garden of Eden, he could feel it. He could sense it. God slipping away. And he still said, but if I don't go through with this, my mother, my brothers, my disciples and best friends will all have to face it themselves. And I'd rather do it in their place. That's the Savior we have. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for all of this information on origins. We looked at dinosaurs, and we saw that, yes, perhaps they started with something very special by you. But Lord, above all, we're looking forward to a world where creation will be reestablished, recreated, and even better than before, we've been told. We're looking forward to that day, Lord, and we pray it comes soon because this world desperately needs to be fixed. Thank you, Lord, for hearing us. Thank you on this Sabbath day. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for the invite. You want to come up and look or even ask me a question up here? Come on up, because I'm going to start packing this stuff away. Turn me up. Testing 1, 2. Okay, I've got one thing I forgot to tell you, and it's very important. And I need a young volunteer to come up.
You won't find him in this.
They won't find him? Oh, yes, I do. Okay, now you know what I'm going to do, right? Okay, I want you to. She was in school and she saw it. So here, I want you to stand like this. We're going to do the rock again. You don't mind, do you? You do mind? You don't mind? Okay. Okay. This is a real, what's your name again?
Lauren.
Okay, hold this.
Strong.
Okay, it's heavy. It's very heavy. Have you got it? You got it? Heavy, heavy, heavy. Give her some help here. Give her some help. Okay. You know, tell them what this is. You remember?
A fossil
Of what?
of
This is fossilized dinosaur poop. Is that cool? It's very heavy. Yeah, you might want to go wash your hands. No. What's that?
Can I be a volunteer?
You want a tooth? Is that what you're saying? No.
No,
Okay.
I want to be a volunteer.
Oh, volunteer still? You want to help? Well, I'll tell you what. How about if I give you the tooth to give to all the kids? Is that okay? Could you do that for me? Okay. Yes, of course, because you're my big helper. Let's see, I've got to find it.